While we await our guest, let's see. Okay, just right on time.
Sorry.
The former Africa chairman here in Enugu State, the person of Mr. Ndubisi and Echionia. Good to have you this morning on today's session of the Urban Parliament. Good morning, Mr. Ndubisi.
Good morning, Joma. Sorry that I
Good.
got here late.
Good to have you. We're glad you were able to arrive safely this morning. All right?
Thank you.
Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us on this critical conversation as it concerns Nigerians.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so thank you for joining us. The conversation right now is on the neutrality of INEC and questions being asked by opposition parties and civil society. No problems, it's fine.
First, ABGA playbook. Because ABGA, whenever there's an election, another national chairman emerges with a Supreme Court judgment. And then we first time was we had to get to the Supreme Court before the Supreme Court announced said, no, this is the national chairman. But it was almost at the election.
Yeah.
Then the next election, the same person came and said the Supreme Court judgment was wrongly interpreted and went to a lower court that interpreted it to say, okay, the Supreme Court judgment meant that he was the chairman. That process went on again too until the Supreme Court. But it was close to the election. So it's a normal playbook in our elections by the ruling party. It happened to PDP. It happened to Labour. So I don't know why ADC thinks that they are special or anything. It is something that they should have expected. And I think that in trying to avoid it was why they went to ADC. Because at a point, it seemed as if they were shopping for a platform that won't create this kind of problem. But it is what it is.
Initially, they thought it would be the SDP when
Yes, it is what it is. It's going to stay on until the election because one of the strategies of the ruling party is to remove your focus from what is important. That is campaigning for elections, and then you're fighting internally until around the election period. So it will go on until it will get to the Supreme Court either way, and. I won't be surprised if along the way a court says no, it is David Mark. INEC says David Mark. Another court says, and so somehow it feels as if INEC enjoys it, because and you can't blame INEC as much as you say that the laws say that these are internal affairs of the party. If a court gives a judgment, INEC if INEC doesn't affect the judgment, we will also come and say that. INEC is not obeying court judgments. So the real critical issue about this particular matter is the court says return to a particular point. What is that point? And there are different interpretations about where that point is. Is it at the point where David Mark was chairman? Is it at the point before David Mark was chairman? So those are subject to interpretation. INEC chose to interpret in a particular way. So it is where we are. And it is not a new place. It is not. I'm not surprised that this is happening. I'll be very surprised if Peter will be that this is happening because it's always happened before elections. Is it going to be resolved? From my experience, it will, but it will resolve near the election because the matters will get to the Supreme Court.
Time is running out already. April has a lot of activities lined up for it. Between April and May of this year, parties are supposed to have completed and conducted their primaries before May 30th, right?
Yes.
If I am correct. And the ADC had already scheduled a number of things, congresses at the state level and convention at the national level.
They've gone ahead to continue.
They've gone ahead to do the congresses. We've had multiple congresses in several states for the ADC, and of course, INEC has said you cannot continue with your congresses and conventions until whatever leadership crisis is resolved. So the ADC is going in defiance of INEC's recommendations. What are your thoughts about this?
Because the ADC also wants to be proactive. If there are timelines that need to be met, they're not going to sit down and wait for INEC or wait for the court and not meet those timelines. So that when the court now takes a decision, we'll say, okay, yes, David Mark is chairman, but we've passed our timelines. So it's easier for them to ignore INEC, do what they have to do, Then when the court takes that decision, it's easy to go back to the court and say, okay, we did this because we are waiting for it, and the court will ratify it. So um, it's between which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you obey INEC and not meet the guidelines, or do you wait for the court and then meet the guidelines? So it's a difficult situation, but that is where we always are. Because of where we are in our politics. If you notice,
Yeah.
the court decides who is party chairman. The court decides who the party can suspend. The court decides who wins an election. So our democracy has totally moved to the courts. And it's something we need to sit down and address. Is this the kind of democracy that we envisage? Is this what we envisage for our democracy? That at the end of the day, it is the courts that will decide who who are the leaders of a political party. A court said you can't even suspend your member. When PDP said they suspended Wike, the court said no, you can't suspend him. So the court can decide who you can suspend in your party. The court now decides who wins an election. So I don't. For me, it makes a mock of the democracy we say we're practicing. If that is the case, we may start thinking about making the judges the electoral umpires, so that once they take a decision, it ends there.
Aren't there some issues supposed to be termed internal party issues? Because there are some rulings we usually hear the court say that the party should go back and resolve their issues, that these are internal party issues that the court shouldn't meddle into.
For me, the political party should be allowed to run. There is no human relationship that is bereft of or that has no conflict. Conflict is managing conflict is part of leadership. Political parties should be allowed to run. If they have conflicts, they resolve it. At the end of the day, whoever they present becomes a candidate. We're looking for a smooth situation where the parties run without conflict. It's never going to happen. That's why it's politics.
Yeah.
Even without interference from the ruling party, within the parties, there will be different interests. And once there are different interests, you will have this kind of conflict. But the parties must be allowed to evolve from conflict. At the end of the day, it is not everything that the court needs to intervene in. They should allow the parties to run. We have 20 political parties. As at today, we have 20. Are you going to intervene in the leadership of the 20? It means that the court will have nothing else to do except to sit down and preside over political party cases. Which for now seems what the Supreme Court does, because I know people who have cases that have been 20 years or 10, 15 years waiting for dates in the Supreme Court, but they're never heard because of the political cases. So for everything we do, there are drawbacks somewhere else. The courts need to focus on the things that the courts need to focus on. They should allow the parties to evolve. They should allow the parties to resolve their conflicts internally. We should have a conflict resolution mechanism within the parties that solves all these things. If you don't solve it, you don't come for election. Those are the basic things. If you can't resolve conflicts within your party internally, if they don't allow you to resolve conflicts within your party internally, what kind of leadership are you going to present to the rest of us if there's a conflict? So the parties are supposed to be where you learn conflict resolution. But every conflict has to go to the court to determine. And then the court takes its time. The court, has conflicting judgments. At the end of the day, we're back to square one. Whatever the politicians do, it is the court that decides who rules the party. It is the court that decides who rules the country. Something is fundamentally wrong, and it's something that I want us to, sit down and look at properly and decide whether this is the kind of politics that we want to run.
All right, it's already too late maybe to sit down and look at it before the 2027 election, so everything has to be done with what we have as the playbook right now.
2027 election will come and go. There will be other elections. That, of course, there's very little we can do for 2027.
I understand, but 2027 is a make or break kind of election because of the kind of agitation coming out from the opposition, ADC, PDP. They are going back to the courts tomorrow to hear what the Supreme Court would say regarding all of the issues within their party and who they think is behind it and what they think should be the norm regarding the courts playing a part in the internal leadership issues. But then they are pointing now at a particular issue, the partisanship, alleged partisanship of the INEC chairman, and I want to know your concerns about it. Farouk Berogi, put out some tweets regarding, some a report regarding tweets by the INEC chairman in 2022, 2023. There are some, according to him, verifiable past tweets by the INEC chairman, Professor Joshua Mupito, from his time as as a professor at the University of Jos, which somehow reveal partisan sympathies. I just mentioned that there was a tweet where, the youth leader of the campaigns in 2023 for the APC, was saying something about winning his polling units, and then the account allegedly linked to Joshua Mupiton also came on that tweet to say, victory is assured, and a number of other implicating tweets that were linked to that account, even though the INEC chairman has tried to deny any involvement with that account. There are forensics that have been dug up to show that his email during his time in University of Jos was what was used to register that particular Twitter account. What are your thoughts about this? Is this grounds enough to begin to agitate for, Mupiton's resignation?
Well, one is that I know that he won't resign. It's all for me. All of us are partisan.
All of us.
Yes, we're all partisan. One way or the other. We're all
All
partisan.
Nigerians.
We're all partisan. Partisan in the sense that we all have, at every point, we all have somebody that we prefer.
So it's too Puritan
So-
to think that he would not have.
And in this country, we've had known political party members who have been appointed INEC, not just Rex, INEC commissioners. Nworuku was appointed an INEC commissioner after he has served as Minister for State under PDP. So what I'm saying is that where sometimes we leave the substance and chase what is. Does it? If for example, the INEC chairman posted something while he was a lecturer, does it disqualify him from being an INEC chairman? That's the question. If at that point he liked a candidate, does it disqualify him from being an INEC chairman? Or does it show that he will not be neutral? It doesn't. What will show whether he will be neutral or not is what he does when he gets to that office. Is he a card-carrying member of APC? If he is, then I will understand what the argument is. But if it is because he made a tweet as a lecturer, all of us have somebody who supports at every point. It doesn't mean we'll continue supporting those people. But for me, that is not what I judge him on, is what he does as INEC chairman.
Okay.
And so far, he's surrounded himself with a lot of controversies, which is what worries me, because he hasn't even started and there are all kinds of controversies. That is what I'm bothered with, because there must be a perception. The neutrality in an election is so critical that it has to be felt, particularly for the umpire. And for me, for some of us that have been in this business for long, we haven't had an INEC chairman that has been neutral, or we haven't had an INEC that has been neutral. It has never happened. Was it under Obasanjo that we had Morris? When have we ever had an INEC that has been neutral? We haven't. So opposition party to win an election, they have to do 2 or 3 times more than the necessary would do, because I said it here the last time. Every election, the opposition party is fighting against INEC, is fighting against the police, and to an extent, it's fighting. But even in all this, we have situations where oppositions emerge, and it is not just peculiar to us. If you listen to narratives around other places, like in Uganda and some of these places, the opposition people are killed, some are in prison. And that is our nature as, I don't know what is our nature as Africans, but that is where we are. So where we are at is not new. Sometimes when we take up an issue and fight over that issue as if it is something novel, it worries me. We should
Learn.
as we never learn from the past. ADC. I am surprised that this is a major issue for ADC. I am. Because it is something that they knew would happen.
So if they had anticipated it, what could they have done, to make sure that it doesn't pop up?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I've listened to somebody who came out to say, we are going to put sand in their garden. I've seen somebody who came out on national TV to say, any party this ADC, P2B and co go to, we are going to put sand in their garden.
Sure.
So what are we talking about?
So I
There
see.
are new political parties. There are new political parties. They could have done like ADC and APC and registered a new political party. But I can guarantee you that anything they do, there will be conflicts that will be resolved.
So it's about the personality and not even about the party that they are in.
Well, it's about the ruling party trying to weaken the opposition, which is normal. No, as much as we complain about it, whether it's at the state level, because when we talk about INEC, remember that we have state electoral commissioners. Is anyone neutral? No. But we don't worry about those because we think that local government elections are properties of the state. But they add up. One leads to the other. Some of the people who complain about the neutrality of the INEC chairman preside over states where their own state electoral commission chairman are not neutral, where they dictate what they do. So sometimes the things that happen to us are the things that we set up in advance. I have said here before that we are all victims because at the end of the day, today's complainants will be tomorrow's what do you call them? Tomorrow's people in power. Look at where we are. The people who are now opposition, sitting down every day to complain, are Rotimi Amici, Peter Obi, El-Rufai. These are the people we are shouting about less than 4 years ago and complaining about the way they were managing the system. So if the system doesn't work, it doesn't work for everybody.
And tables will
You
continue
may
to turn.
temporarily think that you have an advantage, but it's a fleeting advantage. It's not going to last.
Yeah, but isn't it, even if you say, that the ruling party would always do whatever they can to make sure that you don't have any advantage going into the elections, isn't it rubbing salt into injury to, continue to, like you said, torment the opposition? Say, we'll put Sansan in your gari.
Where a winner
would,
takes all. I've said it before.
Just
Where a winner takes some
just
people. It's not
yesterday,
about.
the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development said something that made the headlines. He said, "You can't beat the master at his game," and that was, directed to the opposition. You can't beat the master at his game, telling the opposition this at this point in time, with all of the allegations leveled against the ruling party and what they are doing. Is this fair? Is this sensitive to the Nigerian people who are also paying attention to all what is
That
playing
is
out?
my challenge is the Nigerian people
Yeah.
who are dragged into things that ordinarily they shouldn't be worried about. If it were politicians alone discussing this thing, it would for me it would just be politics.
Yeah.
But they drag people who, instead of focusing on the everyday survivor, now make this who has of any political party. By the way, a lot of people who get dragged into these things are not members of any political party. But and like I said, the challenge. This is a minister talking. And I've said to you about somebody, I don't know whether it's 2 weeks ago, who said anywhere they go, we'll put sand in their
Yeah, I
garri
think I
on
watched that.
national
It was on
television.
TV. Yeah,
Yes.
I watched it. I can't
You know,
remember.
and
exactly who it
nobody
was.
complains about these things, which means that these are premeditated things. They go out of their way to make things difficult for people. And why can they do that? Because we have a problem in every aspect of every part of our system. If the judiciary was a bit more responsive and organized, we wouldn't have what we're having. Some of these cases should ordinarily be thrown off. Some of these cases should ordinarily be thrown back to the political parties, sort out themselves. But the judiciary interferes. Every case can go to the judiciary. The judiciary will sit